Welcome to another Inside Kids Minds episode, where we explore the science behind child development and behavior.
Today's episode is about the parenting styles and how they affect child psychology, and we'll dive into how different approaches to parenting shape a kid's emotional and psychological growth.
Right. The podcast is fully AI-generated using the latest technology and draws from trusted, peer-reviewed sources from leading institutions like Harvard, Oxford, and the NIH. So, let's get started.
You ever think about how siblings growing up in the exact same house can turn out so differently?
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
There was that TED Talk, Yuko Munakata's, I think. It really made me pause. The idea that the shared environment itself, maybe it's not the biggest piece of the puzzle for success or happiness.
Right. It challenges a lot of assumptions.
So, okay, if it's not just where kids are raised, what does really matter? That's what we're diving into today.
Exactly. We're looking at parenting styles, those early interactions, things research suggests have a pretty significant impact.
And we've got a lot to draw from, right? Harvard, Oxford, APA, loads of studies from PMC.
We do. A really rich collection. And the goal is to, pull out the key stuff. How do different ways of parenting actually shape kids' development, their emotional health, their behavior?
And for you listening, the aim isn't to drown you in jargon. It's about getting those aha moments right. Practical insights you can use, whether you're a parent, an educator, or just, interested in how we become who we are.
Definitely. We'll touch on brain development, Harvard's work there.
Mental health links from studies in Germany and Switzerland.
Different cultural takes from Oxford, Turkey.
And that core idea of early relationships, which the Harvard Center on the Developing Child really emphasizes.
It's interesting how these different threads often weave together. They point towards some really fundamental things.
So that's the mission for this deep dive. Figure out what the research tells us about parenting impact, focusing on things like serve and return, discipline, cultural differences, but keeping it accessible.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, so where do we even start with something this huge? Those earliest interactions seem like the logical place, maybe. The building blocks.
I think so. And Harvard's serve and return concept is perfect for that. It's so fundamental.
Can you break that down a bit? Serve and return.
Sure. It's essentially a metaphor for interaction. The child serves, makes a sound, points at something, reaches out, and the caregiver returns, responds with eye contact, words, a gesture, acknowledges the serve.
So it's that back and forth.
Exactly. That simple volley. It's absolutely critical for building the architecture of the brain.
And what I liked from their video is how normal it is. It's not about fancy toys or anything.
Not at all. It can happen anytime, anywhere. A child looks at a dog, the parent says, "Oh, look at the puppy." That's it. It's about being tuned in.
Just noticing what they're noticing and joining in.
Right.
Supporting their exploration.
Precisely. And this ties really nicely into the broader idea of nurturing care that came up in that Tanzanian research we looked at.
Nurturing care. Tell me more about that.
It's basically that whole environment, warmth, responsiveness, safety, meeting basic needs consistently. The Tanzanian study really highlighted how crucial this is, especially in the very early years.
It sounds like the foundation for everything else, really.
It kind of is. It's about recognizing each child's unique value, too.
And didn't that Tanzanian study mention a specific program, something practical?
Yeah, the Tuhike's Pamoja curriculum for caregivers. It focused on helping caregivers understand their child's perspective, involving them in little decisions, building that sense of agency early on.
Okay, so we have these crucial early interactions, this nurturing environment. How does this then translate into those broader patterns we call parenting styles?
That's the next logical step, right? Because these daily interactions, they add up. They form an approach. And studies from Germany and Switzerland especially have dug into these styles and how they connect to kids' well-being.
Right, the classic styles. Authoritative, authoritarian, permissive. Can you define those based on the research? What do they actually look like?
Okay, so the Swiss study laid them out pretty clearly. Authoritarian think high demands, lots of control, but low responsiveness. Obedience is key. Communication tends to be one way, sometimes described as aggressive.
Strict rules, low warmth.
Kind of, yeah. Then permissive is almost the opposite in some ways. High responsiveness, lots of warmth and support, but low on demands, control, and consistent discipline. They might avoid setting firm limits.
More like a friend than a parent, maybe?
Sometimes, yeah. Or hesitant to enforce roles.
And then the one that often gets called the gold standard, authoritative.
Right. The research often links this one to the most positive outcome. It's about finding a balance, high responsiveness, so Warmth and connection are there,
Yeah.
but also clear expectations and high demands appropriate for the child's age. They use dialogue, explanations, guidance. They allow independence to grow.
So warmth and boundaries.
Exactly. Now, the German KGS study took these styles and looked at, well, how do they actually relate to kids' mental health?
And that was a big study, wasn't it? Covered a wide age range.
It was ages 11 to 17. And importantly, they looked at both mothers' and fathers' parenting styles and controlled for things like socioeconomic status and migration background in Germany.
Okay, so what do they find?
The really striking finding was with the demanding controlling style that's similar to authoritarian and also what they called an emotionally distancing style.
Emotionally distancing,
That
right?
one was defined as low responsiveness and low demands, so kind of uninvolved, lacking warmth and structure.
Okay. And the link to mental health.
Children and teens with parents using either the demanding controlling or emotionally distancing styles, both mothers and fathers reported significantly higher mental health difficulties.
Higher difficulties.
Right.
And what does that mean?
Using
Using those SDQ scores.
Yeah, the Strengths and Difficulties Questionnaire scores. It's a standard measure. Higher scores generally indicate more problems, things like emotional symptoms, conduct problems, hyperactivity, peer problems.
Wow. So those styles showed a clear negative association. What about permissive versus authoritative?
Interestingly, the German study found relatively small differences between those two in terms of the mental health scores. The biggest contrast was definitely with the demanding, controlling, and emotionally distancing styles.
And that held true regardless of family background in Germany.
Yes, across different socioeconomic levels and migration statuses, it suggests these dynamics have a pretty potent impact.
That's quite compelling. Did they find anything protective?
They did. Support from both parents, that feeling of warmth and connection, seemed to protect against both internalizing issues like depression or anxiety and externalizing ones like substance use or acting out.
So that parental support piece is key.
Absolutely. And the Swiss study echoed that strongly. They found parental support predicted lower anxiety and depression and also more pro-social behavior like being helpful and kind.
And they used a tool, the PSDQ, that works across cultures.
Yes, which helps strengthen the findings, suggesting these links might be quite widespread.
No, there was another style mentioned in the Turkish study, overprotective. How does that fit in?
Right, overprotective parenting. They described it as being highly attentive, but also tending to sort of override the child's decisions, making choices for them constantly.
Okay. And the potential downsides?
The study suggested it could lead to lower self-confidence and maybe some social development issues. It's like, if you never let a child navigate challenges or make small choices, they don't build that resilience or self-belief.
Yeah, hinders their ability to learn from experience, even small mistakes. Okay, so we have these styles. Where does discipline fit? Because that seems like a major practical difference.
It really is. Discipline approaches vary hugely. Authoritarian parents might lean towards stricter, perhaps harsher punishment without much explanation.
Right.
Permissive parents, as we said, often lack consistency. They might avoid confrontation or consequences.
And authoritative.
They tend to see discipline more as teaching. Setting clear limits, yes, but explaining why, focusing on natural consequences, and maintaining that warmth throughout, it aligns with their whole approach.
That makes sense. And didn't the Tanzanian study touch on discipline specifically, something about negative discipline?
It did. Their analysis found that mother negative discipline, things like harsh verbal or physical punishment when the child was 4 or 5, seemed to mediate some of the developmental outcomes later. It suggests those negative approaches can have a real impact, especially early on.
Okay, so some clear themes are emerging. But parenting isn't one size fits all globally, right? What about cultural differences?
A really important point. While the Swiss study used a cross-culturally validated tool, the Oxford study gave us a fascinating glimpse into China. They actually looked at university students' microblogs, like their online posts.
Online posts. To understand parenting, how did that work?
They analyzed the language and emotional tone the students used and related it back to the parenting style the students reported experiencing growing up. They grouped styles into positive, negative, and mixed based on warmth, rejection, and overprotection levels.
That's clever. What did they find?
Differences in how students talked about certain topics, like social life or family, depending on their perceived parenting background. Even gender played a role in the expressions. It suggests our early experiences might subtly shape even how we communicate online later.
That's wild. And the Turkish study. Any cultural notes there?
Yeah, they linked what they called democratic parenting, which sounds a bit like authoritative, to kids being more task-oriented in preschool competition. They also noted that in Turkey, parental education level is often seen as a big factor influencing parenting style.
So while principles like warmth seem universal, the way they play out or what else is considered important can definitely vary.
Exactly. Cultural context matters.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. Early interactions, the different styles, discipline, cultural nuances. If you had to boil it down, what are the main actionable takeaways for parents, educators, anyone listening?
Well, I think the most consistent message is the power of being responsive and supportive. That serve and return, that nurturing care, it's foundational. You can't really overstate its importance for healthy development.
And conversely,
Conversely, the research, particularly that German study, really flags the potential risks of parenting that's high on control but low on warmth, or just emotionally distant. The link to mental health difficulties seems quite strong.
so finding that balance seems key. The authoritative approach, warmth, communication, clear expectations, comes across pretty positively in much of this research.
It does appear beneficial across different studies and contexts, but, it also loops back to that TED Talk point.
Right, the parents matter, but it's complex, not direct control.
Exactly. Avoid the trap of thinking you can perfectly engineer your child's outcome and maybe ease up on the self-blame. Focus on influence, connection, providing that supportive base.
Which connects to what the Harvard Center emphasizes too, strengthening the whole support system around the child and family. It's not just about the parents in isolation.
Absolutely. Building community capacity, normalizing asking for help, that's crucial. They even mention programs like Simple Interactions that help professionals focus on and build those positive, everyday developmental moments between caregivers and kids.
It really does all seem to circle back to relationships and connection, doesn't it? From the micro level serve and return to the macro level communities.
It does. So to wrap up, we've seen the huge role of early interactions, the impact of different parenting styles on mental health and behavior, especially the risks of low warmth eye, control the nuances of discipline, and that cultural context always matters.
So here's something to maybe chew on after listening.
Yeah.
Given how complex parenting is, with all these factors interacting, how can we as individuals, as communities, really build environments that best support kids? Environments that prioritize building those strong, healthy relationships right from the start. Especially knowing, as some Harvard research suggests, that these early experiences can leave biological traces that affect health across our entire lives. It really makes you think about the deep importance of those early years, doesn't it?
Food for thought. So that's all for today. Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Inside Kids' Minds. We hope you gained valuable insights into how parenting styles influence child psychology.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to our channels. New episodes drop every week. Until next time, thanks for listening.